So, wow. So there's another question. It's a really long question, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But basically, it's asking, is everything 100% real? I mean, some of your stories are really, they're outlandish. They're hard to believe. Are they? And I believe I've heard you say they're fact checked, and you have researchers, and it's all legit.
So the stories we find they're rooted in reality. I think that the parts that are, I guess, the gray area are like people will come up with, they'll have some experience, like it's their own personal experience about what happened to them. Take, for example, famously, there's the Skinwalker Ranch. It's a place out in Utah. Now I'm forgetting where it is, but it's a very famous paranormal hotspot. And there are loads of stories that are like fact checked in the sense that, you know, multiple people witnessed something happening on this property. But like there isn't actually a way to fact check if it really happened. You have someone's perspective about what they experienced. And so we'll get people's perspectives and we'll present the story through their perspective, but we're not trying to convince you that what they did was absolutely like that happened. It's more like this is really what somebody experienced and here's what they said, here's what they saw. So it's more like it's up to you to interpret for those types of stories. But the bulk of the stories are like, this is what happened.
Yeah.
However, there are those POVs where we're kind of relying on someone's perspective, which we have no way of knowing if it's true. It feels credible, but we don't know.
I get it. Interesting. I got to interview the owner of Skinwalker.
Yeah, actually, that's actually why I brought it up. I thought that you had interviewed somebody connected to Skinwalker Ranch.
Really cool guy, Brandon Fugal. Finally come to fruition. I can't believe we're sitting here. I've been just ecstatic about interviewing you for a long time. So thank you for coming.
It's an honor, and glad we could make the time. I'm anxious to answer any questions and dive into the big picture relative to the investigation and all of the events leading up to what has driven us to launch what I believe to be the most important frontier science effort of its kind in the country.
It's incredible. You know, I've wanted to tap into the UFO, UAP phenomenon type content, subject, whatever you want to call it, for a long time. And you and your team, or anybody on your team, was my number one choice, because I look at all these people out that are putting content out or putting information out, disclosure and stuff, and you're the only organization that really just backs it with real science, real experiments, and it's documented. And you know, this is a subject that, I mean, it's a controversial subject, right. and it's it can be hard to wrap your head around this stuff. And so the way that you guys are bringing this stuff to the forefront, and the way you're doing it with real science and scientists and experiments is fascinating. It is fascinating stuff.
They're scary topics. I mean, a lot of these topics are unsettling. A lot of people are understandably uncomfortable being faced with the reality that these things are happening in our airspace, happening in our own backyards. And to have scientific rigor and discipline and a multidisciplinary team focused on gathering the data and documenting the reality of the phenomena, in many cases for the first time, it's an honor, but it's a sobering privilege. And I think we're just getting warmed up.
I think so too. Let me give you a quick introduction here. So, chairman of Colliers International, commercial real estate mogul, investor, entrepreneur, visionary, husband, father, Boy Scout, and the owner of the infamous Skinwalker Ranch. Now, Skinwalker Ranch is the most Googled location in the entire world.
Or at least the country. It's the number one most Googled landmark in the United States. That's according to Travel and Leisure and Google.
That is crazy. More UAP, UFO sighting phenomenons happening there than, as far as I know, than anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah, for whatever reason, we're seeing the highest level of, or the highest frequency of UFO sightings and paranormal activity centered in this area. For whatever reason, it has been a hotbed, and this has been going on for decades, if not millennia. And we're fortunate to be picking up the baton and carrying forward in a sophisticated and I think a more aggressive fashion. But these things have been going on for some time, and we're finally bringing it to the public's attention, and I think the most dynamic way and transparent way.
You're doing a hell of a job. And you're also, it turned into a TV series, 2 different TV series. Skinwalker Ranch is number 1 on pretty much every distribution channel that it's on. And but I want to talk to you after dinner last night. There's a lot of layers to peel back with you. So I'd actually like to get a full life story if you're
You bet.
okay
Let's
with that.
dive in.
Starting at childhood.
Ask me anything.
All right, I'll take you up. And now we're getting to what I've really been dying to talk to you about, Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, I found Skinwalker Ranch from a buddy of mine that I used to work with at CIA. He passed me the program, and I dove in, and I've been infatuated with it ever since. And there's so much going on there. You have cattle mutilations, you have radiation spikes, you have more UAP, UFO activity than anywhere else I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
You have all these weird injuries happening to people that out there. I mean, how did this ranch ever even wind up on your radar?
Well, it's an unlikely story. But about 13 years ago, I was funding an advanced physics effort. We'd actually transformed a large percentage of our hangar facility, of our family's aviation management and hangar facility at the Provo Airport, into an engineering lab testing physics theories, dealing with gravitational physics. It was an interesting effort. Was something I did not publicize, and we ultimately, using scientific rigor and discipline, disproved the core claims and the theories that were being advanced. But through that effort...
Hold on. What got you interested in that?
Yeah, it was a former client. So I had a client that I represented back in the mid-'90s that was a genius software development executive that ended up forming a company that became the world's leading internet consulting firm. And he left that firm ultimately to fund efforts relative to the UFO phenomena. He had claimed that he had his own experience, had been visited. I found it all to be quite unbelievable, but I could not deny his success in business. I'd had the privilege of negotiating his first headquarters transaction and working with him at a young age. And when reconnecting with him in late 2009, going into 2010, he claimed that he'd spent tens of millions of dollars focused on really discovering the technology or the principle of action that would enable gravity, anti-gravity and energy. I was skeptical, but willing to listen. He was a very celebrated, respected tech mogul in his 20s, in the 90s. I mean, he sold his first company to Novell as a teenager, and as I'd mentioned, he'd built the world's largest internet consulting firm.
Wow.
That I had the privilege of advising and working with. So, hearing his claims, I was intrigued. I was willing to invest, even willing to devote some of our facilities and resources to the effort. Well, it ended up becoming a very challenging endeavor, but through that experience, I developed relationships with a team of science advisors that, unbeknownst to me, were simultaneously advising an elusive billionaire out of Las Vegas named Robert Bigelow, of Bigelow Aerospace, who as a real estate developer and entrepreneur was a kindred spirit of sorts. And so following the closure of that research project back in 2013, I was surprised to receive a call from the two senior science advisors that had been on our board with the question, asking if I would be interested in having a discussion and a meeting with Mr. Bigelow regarding a ranch in northeastern Utah known as Skinwalker Ranch. They asked me if I'd heard of this place. I told them, yeah, I was familiar with a book that had been published, back in the mid-2000s called Hunt for the Skinwalker. I chuckled and told them, I didn't know that there was any truth to it, but I remember it being an entertaining read at the time. But I told them, I said, that I'm a skeptic. I've never seen a UFO, a ghost orb. You're also aware that I just concluded funding a project where we, by using scientific rigor and discipline, debunked the core claims. And I'm really not interested in these fringe topics. And I happen to believe that there's most likely a natural prosaic explanation for the claims that are being made. Well, they proceeded to say, well, Brandon, there's a lot more going on than meets the eye, and you as a real estate mogul and advisor in the Intermountain West, seem to be a potential fit to joint venture or at least have a discussion with Mr. Bigelow. And I agreed. I jumped at the chance to at least have a meeting, to have a discussion, flew down to Las Vegas and found myself at Mr. Bigelow's Bigelow Aerospace compound, which is the closest thing to a James Bond villain lair that I've ever seen. I mean, it's an incredible facility. I mean, huge buildings that house full-size space stations and space habitats that have been designed where they're doing the materials science and the life safety testing and engineering to really position Bigelow Aerospace, at least at the time, to be the real estate development company of space.
Wow.
And Mr. Bigelow had an interest in potentially selling the Utah property. He had expressed not only willingness to consider the sale, but the fact that he was very busy and occupied with negotiating deals with SpaceX and NASA and others, playing a key role in the private space race. We had a great visit, and I think developed a good relationship. I told him that I was a skeptic, that I'd never seen a UFO or a ghost or orb or anything of the sort, and that I would be bringing in my own team. I also asked him for any of the data, and he said, well, I'm selling the property on an as-is basis. I'm not willing to turn over any data, not only because the ranch was part of a Pentagon-funded black budget program between 2007 and 2013, but he went on to say that he felt that he wanted to keep that private, and I agreed. At the end of the day, I felt that starting with a clean slate would help me establish a baseline, and most likely help me even better establish that there was a natural explanation for the reports.
You wanted a clean slate. You didn't want the previous data or research?
No, I didn't push. I asked respectfully, and I respected his response and his request.
Did he? So was he unable to pass the research and the data because it was a black budget program, or did he just wasn't willing to share?
Yeah, I think it was both.
Did he want you to continue the research at the ranch?
I think he saw in me a worthy successor as someone who would at least be the appropriate owner taking it forward, given my real estate background, proximity to the ranch. I live about 2.5 hours away. It's only about a 45-minute flight via helicopter. And he had heard positive things about me from his science advisors. His science advisors had told him that I had managed the project that we had shared in common with professionalism, and I think that that meant something to him. He was not putting the property up on the market for sale. I mean, the property was never offered or marketed for sale. This was a very private transaction, private dialogue, and I told him that I would acquire the property so long as my identity would be kept confidential. And I worked with my legal counsel to structure the entities that would shield my identity. In fact, my name wasn't on any of the paperwork by design. I had registered agents that managed that process, and truly wanted to stay below the radar and not have my identity associated with the ranch in any way.
What year was this?
2016.
2016?
So I closed on the property the first week in April 2016 and proceeded to bring in my own team and assess really whether there was any reality to the claims that were being made. At the time, I was on the board of the National Parks Council, the Boy Scouts of America, and honestly was intending to donate it to the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts for a potential site that where those experiences that could be had, because I didn't think that there was anything truly unusual. I felt like my investigation and research would ultimately confirm that there was nothing paranormal or disturbing about this incredible piece of property. And so when I flew in and saw the property for the first time, I was shocked at how strikingly beautiful the landscape was. As the helicopter came in and I was looking over at my brother who was piloting and looking back at Jim Morse, who I was recruiting to come in and be really the face of the property at the time and be the ranch manager and the community liaison, I was taken aback by how beautiful the property was and the diversity of the landscape. Here you have this red rock mesa that runs the entire expanse of the property from east to west. You have waterways that bisect the property. You have these old pioneer homesteads that are still standing, that provide a very unique, interesting backdrop, and it is a working ranch. I mean, there has been cattle brought on and off the property periodically, and I've maintained that use through my stewardship over the course of the last 7+ years as well. And so when I flew into the property, I was just shocked at how beautiful it was. You could shoot any number of Hollywood films, of John Wayne westerns on this property, or even Westworld, which is a favorite of mine. It's that diverse and that strikingly unique. And I proceeded to engage professionals to bring in a superintendent within days, Thomas Winterton, who helped assess the physical facilities and what we needed to do in order to install certain things. And we had caretakers. At the time, I had a professional, an ex-Marine, who was a drone expert that was tasked with not only conducting drone surveillance of the property, but also developing a historical record of the landscape to better understand every inch of this 512-acre assemblage.
So when you took over, when you took possession of Skinwalker Ranch, you didn't have any idea how much activity was actually happening there.
No,
And on top of that, you were a skeptic. You had mentioned last night that you had purchased Skinwalker Ranch to basically debunk the entire UFO UAP topic. So what I'm curious about is how does somebody that has been conducting experiments with the US government on a black budget program, who very much believes in all of these phenomenons that are happening, how do you determine the value when you're selling to a skeptic who wants to acquire it to debunk the entire operation?
Yeah, it's a negotiation. It's subjective, but I think Mr. Bigelow knew that I was respectful. He knew that I would handle the property with care, with respect. I think that he respected my desire for anonymity, for privacy. I didn't tell my family. My family, my closest business partners were purposely out of the loop and unaware of my acquisition and this new venture by design. So it was an interesting launch to the saga that continues to unfold with Skinwalker Ranch. In the first several months, we dealt with primarily challenges dealing with dilapidated infrastructure. We had a septic system that wasn't working, that was backed up. I found quickly we didn't have adequate power infrastructure to be able to secure the property. We had no fiber optic connectivity to be able to effectively conduct a more advanced investigation. So the first several months, I coordinated with Thomas Winterton and Jim Morse and my caretakers and other advisors to address the infrastructure issues of this property. It was very, very run down. There was no command center. There was no technology. The reports that Mr. Bigelow received on a weekly basis were sent via fax. There was a fax machine. In 2016, there was a fax machine that was the primary technology used for disseminating reports relative to activity at the ranch, believe it or not. And I was surprised to find that the ranch was in that state. I was also surprised to find that on the perimeter fence line, there were animal body parts. There were animal bladders hanging from the fence line when I was first shown the property by exiting Bigelow Security. And I asked the security, I said, what is the nature of, what the hell is that? Why are those things hanging from the fence line perimeter of the property? And the security at the time looked at me with a straight face and said, look, the Native American neighbors that surround this property place these animal bladders on the fence line and bless them to keep the demonic spirits and entities inside this property and off of their property. And I quickly learned that the tribal leaders in the Uinta Basin and surrounding the property had been telling their people not to even look the way of the ranch, that they were told, don't even look the way of the property, or else you may have demonic forces, entities that would follow you. And that's something that has been discussed and documented, but is an interesting part of the history. So I was very surprised when first inspecting the property and visiting the property at what I found. After a couple of months, my surveyor contacted me one day with a report that he'd just captured the image of a UFO was right about noon in June of 2016. And I said, really? Are you sure? And he said, yeah, I have it on my camera. And I told him, will you stop everything right now? Don't talk to anyone else. Drive straight to my office because I want the metadata. I want to download that picture without it being corrupted, without it being compromised. I want it directly on my graphic director's computer to be analyzed if you really believe that you've captured something. And so he did. He drove 2.5 hours straight to my office in Salt Lake City and downloaded that image right there in front of me, with my graphics director. We still have the metadata, and it was an interesting image. In fact, it reminded me of the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars fame.
Really?
And it was interesting. I checked the flight records to see if there was any activity, any commercial or private air traffic that would match up with that in the basin during that time that again corresponded to that metadata, and there was none. And it was intriguing. Was I convinced that the UFO phenomena was real? That there was some extraordinary cause or origin to this? No. But I was intrigued. Several weeks later, I get another call. Brandon, I've got another image. Myself and the caretakers just saw a glowing object appear right outside of Homestead 1 or right outside of the ranch house, and I've got the images, and I need to show you this. And I told them, drive straight to my office. Please get here as fast as you can. And sure enough, it was an intriguing image. We had the metadata. It was very different than the UFO that was captured weeks before.
How so?
It had a different shape, different characteristics.
Do you still have these images?
I'll share those with you.
We'll put them up on screen.
You bet. And those created some interest. I still was unconvinced. I mean, we have the Utah Test and Training Range out west of Hill Air Force Base. I mean, I've worked as the commercial real estate advisor to Falcon Hill and that aerospace research park, and I'm aware that there are programs that are out there, and there are tests being conducted that could very well be potentially connected with some of the unidentified aerial phenomena that have been reported. So I remained curious but unconvinced. And then in October of 2016, I received a call from one of my advisors saying that a certain individual, a prominent doctor out of Las Vegas, who had been working on Area 51, had been a consulting physician to Area 51, had as his number one request, his number one wish on his life bucket list to visit Skinwalker Ranch.
Wow.
And this advisor of mine asked if I would be willing to host him. And I said, yeah, of course. I was intrigued by this individual's background. And I said, as long as they sign the confidentiality agreement and the liability waiver that I put in place, I have no problem hosting him.
What did that conversation go like when he arrived?
Well, so they arrive in Salt Lake City, signed the confidentiality agreement. I of course, informed them that I did not want my identity as the owner in the public domain. I didn't want that disclosed, and I appreciated them keeping that private. I also told them that there had been reports, of course, for 20 plus years that there's strange activity on the property, and that even though I hadn't witnessed anything.
I mean, sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but as a skeptic of the entire operation that's been going on there, even after seeing the two images,
photo images,
where you were still a skeptic, correct? And now you have a guy who had a major part in Area 51,
right?
Which, I mean, what's going through your head when you get a phone call asking you for this guy from Area 51? This is his lifelong dream to come out to Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, does that validate
No, I just thought it was cool. I thought it was interesting. I was happy to host them. And so when they signed the confidentiality agreement and flew into Salt Lake City and met with me, an hour before making the journey and flying out to the ranch, I told them, I said, you understand, I've owned the ranch for 6 months and I haven't yet to experience anything unusual. I've been going out there periodically to inspect the property, meet with my team, and all I find is a beautiful landscape. So if you're expecting that you're going to come out today and see something unusual, bear in mind, I own the property, and I have yet to witness anything personally with my own eyes or even feel anything that would be even slightly unusual out on the property. So I look forward to hosting you today. I look forward to it being a fun day looking at a historic landscape that has a very interesting history to it, but don't expect anything more than that. I wanted that disclaimer to be out there at the very beginning. And so we proceeded to fly out to the ranch. We were accompanied by my physicist, who is Eric Bard, who continues to this day as our principal investigator. Eric was also a skeptic. Eric was the physicist brought in to debunk and disprove the claims of the gravitational physics effort that I had funded at our private hangar facility. So I thought, who better to bring in to bring scientific rigor and discipline and a critical eye and critical thinking skills to the ranch than Eric Bard. He'd already disproved these core claims that we'd spent millions of dollars investigating, and was a very, very skeptical person. I mean, you could flat out call him that he's a non-believer. And so Eric Bard, the physicist, accompanied us that day, as well as ranch manager Jim Morse. And upon arrival, everyone wanted to hike up the mesa. Everyone wanted to get up on top of the mesa and look out over this incredibly beautiful property. And I was like, okay, fine, knock yourselves out. I was wearing Armani slacks and black dress shoes, and I didn't want to get dirty. And I was trying to somehow get a line out at the time to check my voicemail. And so they proceeded to hike up to the top of the mesa, and within minutes, I hear Eric Bard, the physicist, start shouting down, Brandon, get up here. And I look up and I yell, I said, really? You really want me to hike up? You want me to run up the face of the mesa to join you? He says, yes, get up here right now. And he's pointing to his iPhone. So I shrug, go booking it up the face of the mesa in my dress shoes and my slacks. And as I arrive out of breath at the top of the mesa, he's sitting there looking at his phone and motions for me to watch his iPhone. We sit there in silence for minutes. Nothing's happening. I see nothing unusual. I'm like, what are you talking about? And Eric says, well, you should have seen it. My phone was malfunctioning in the most strange ways. It was turning all sorts of magenta purple color. And I've never seen this. It was very, very unusual. And I just shrugged. I said, well, it's not doing it now. And about that time, the others that were up there on the mesa said that they were feeling a little bit woozy, feeling a little uneasy. They weren't, and wanted to hike back down and proceed with the tour of the ranch. And so we all went down and proceeded to drive out to Homestead 2, which is the cluster of old structures that seems to be a center of gravity for strange phenomena on the property. And as we pull up to Homestead 2, and we're all kind of congregating out in front of those old structures, it was interesting. A few people said, well, do you feel the ground shifting? And even Eric Bard said, yeah, I feel, you guys feeling this sensation that I'm feeling, kind of vertigo? And I was kind of across the courtyard from them, and I just smiled and said, no, I don't feel anything. And then all of a sudden, Eric says, my phone's doing it again. My phone's malfunctioning again. Well, I learned from earlier that I need to move fast if I'm going to see, whatever is happening. And so I dart over to his side, and sure enough, his whole phone had turned purple, had turned this magenta purplish color, and was flashing and acting all erratically. And everyone was talking about how they were feeling uneasy. Well, thank goodness he had the presence of mind to screen capture the malfunctioning phone. I'll share that with you right now.
Thank you.
And you can see it. In fact, he was taking photos of me right before, standing in the entry to Homestead 2 in front of the doorway, just before they started feeling uneasy, and then ultimately the smartphone malfunction started occurring. It was strange. My brother Cameron, who is a very skilled aviator, has multiple degrees in aviation science and management, and my little brother Matthew, who runs operations, who were there, said that they weren't comfortable staying. They said we want to leave. We'll go to the airport. Call us later on today when you're available, but we're feeling uneasy, which I thought was the silliest thing. I'm like, come on, really?
How many people from Area 51?
It was, so there was the surgeon, the doctor, and then he was accompanied by 2 security professionals. One was the former president of the California Hells Angels, and another one was a contractor. And then he had his son, who was a grown adult. I don't know how old he was, but his son also accompanied. So it was a group of 4 of them that joined. At the time, my brothers, Eric Bard, who was my consulting physicist, and Jim Morse, ranch manager. And they're all witnessing this.
So what was the conversation like? They signed the paperwork, they signed the non-disclosure, the waiver. What are they hoping to see?
Well, I asked them, I said, geez, after telling them, I've never seen a UFO. I've owned the ranch for 6 months, and all I've seen is a strikingly beautiful landscape. And I'm skeptical. I've never seen anything like that I can report. And I proceeded to ask them, I said, we're sitting there preparing to leave for Skinwalker Ranch. I said, do you guys really believe in this UFO crap? And the 2 security guys, the 2 security professionals that were accompanying the doctor, said no. They shook their heads, no, we don't believe it. And the doctor just smiled, and he says, you guys don't even know what you're talking about. You have no idea what is real. And we all just kind of shrugged it off, and I kind of winked at the 2 security guards knowingly that, oh yeah, the doctor's probably just another UFO nut, but that's okay. He's a nice enough guy. So anyways, we find ourselves out at Homestead 2, smartphone malfunctioning. Everyone's feeling these physical effects. My brothers are feeling uneasy enough that they want to leave, and they leave. They're happier driving and sitting at the airport for hours until I tell them that we're ready to fly back. And I'm finding the whole thing interesting. Well, as we're all discussing kind of the history of Skinwalker Ranch and the homesteads, we proceed to kind of get our phones out to take some pictures. I felt like it was a good photo opportunity. And lo and behold, my phone's dead. It had previously been at 80% charge. My phone's completely dead. Eric Bard's phone that had recorded that where he had screen captured the anomaly, the strange colors and flashing, was dead. The others' phones were dead. So we didn't have our cameras. So I thought, darn, well, we better go take them back to the ranch house and plug them in and let them charge up, but we don't want to disrupt our day because of it. It was very frustrating. And so we took the phones back, put them in chargers, and then we proceeded to return back out to the old homesteads. This time we drove all the way back out to Homestead 3, which is beyond Homestead 2, and it's a single structure. It's pretty haunting looking. And we pull up around the backside of the structure. This is October 14th of 2016. And we all pile out and we all walk around the other side. And again, we're looking at the landscape and everyone's visiting and having a good experience. I mean, my brothers have left and returned to the airport, awaiting a call, hours later. And we're just visiting. And after about 10 minutes, I asked, well, where's George, the big guy, the security, the 6'6" security professional that was there wasn't present, and for some reason we kind of lost track of him. And everyone said, well, when we all piled out of the open air Polaris, UTV, the Ranger, no one really paid attention. I said, well, let me go try to find him. So I proceed to walk around to the back of the Homestead 3, to find George. And right as I'm coming around the corner in this grass area where we'd parked it, and the vehicle being off in the distance, it was as if something cupped my ears. It was all of my hearing was impacted. It was as if I walked into a soundproof room. Have you ever been into an anechoic chamber or a soundproof room?
I have.
And that sensation, the only thing you can do to simulate it right now is by cupping your ears.
It's like a frequency change.
Yeah, all of the ambient noise disappears. And I thought it was the strangest thing. It was the strangest sensation. And then I see off in the distance, standing fully upright, this 6'6" giant of a man in the back of this UTV. And I thought, that's odd. So I yell his name, George. And I can hear kind of muffled. It's almost like yelling underwater. I thought that was strange. And I proceed to walk to get closer, and he's not responding. And as I near the vehicle and shout his name again, he's standing upright with his eyes closed. And right as I'm nearing the vehicle, all of the ambient noise, all of the sound comes back, is restored. And as I yell his name again, his eyes fluttered open. And he looked down at me. And I said, what's going on? Did something happen? What's going on? And he said, well, that was weird. And I asked him, I said, what was weird? What is weird? And he says, well, when you all jumped out, when you pulled up and you stopped the vehicle and you all jumped out, I stood up and found myself paralyzed. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, and then everything went black. And he asked, how long have I been here? And I said, about 10 minutes. And he just shook his head, was obviously disturbed. I asked him, I said, has this ever happened to you in your life? Have you ever had this experience? And he said, no, I've never experienced anything like this. 10 minutes had passed. Who knows what happened, but he felt odd. He expressed the fact that he felt a little bit off, and we proceeded to gather everyone up and jump back in the vehicles. And so as we're going back to retrieve our phones to have our cameras, we're driving on that dirt road at the base of the mesa. You know, that main road that you see on the docuseries that runs east-west on the property. And as we're about halfway back to Homestead 1, or the ranch house, or the command center as we now call it, the other security professional in the back starts shouting, stop the vehicle, stop the vehicle. And I'm driving. I'm just trucking along, driving this little Polaris UTV. And I look back and he's waving his hands, pointing up ahead. So I bring the vehicle to a stop. And he's just shouting. He says, look at that, look at that. And sure enough, I look right where he's pointing, right ahead of us, right above the mesa at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on October 14th. And there is a 40, 50 foot long, silver grayish disc-like object. What can only be described as a flying saucer. And it's just sitting there in broad daylight, clear as day, right above the mesa, probably about 100 feet above the mesa or so. And we're all sitting there astonished. I'm like, you guys see that? And he's like, yeah, that's what I was trying to get you to stop the vehicle. Within a couple of seconds, it changes position. It literally blinked from one position to another. Either it moved with split-second speed, or it was able to change position through some other means, but it moves about 50 feet to the left or to the north. We all
like it appeared 50 feet to the left, or you actually saw it move?
It was like in the blink of an eye, it could change position and move that quickly. We all sat there astonished and said, "Whoa, did you see that?" Seconds later, it drops to just kind of a low hover above the mesa. It literally changes position and drops right above the mesa. Still sitting there, clear as day. It was almost like a video game. It was surreal. And then within a few seconds later, it darts to the right. We're all, with every movement, we're gasping. We're saying, are you watching this? Do you see this? And then within about 20 seconds from the start of the event, it is gone. It appeared that it either went to a dot as if it were darting off into the distance at split-second speed, or it was literally phasing out of our perception instantaneously. But it was gone. And that whole event, spanning about 20 seconds, that I saw right in front of us with multiple witnesses at my side that I had not met before that day, that had professed the same skepticism that morning, sat there changed forever. In that moment, Shawn, I went from being an open-minded skeptic to an experiencer. It wasn't about belief. It was undeniable. It was fact. What we saw was real. Eric Bard, my physicist and principal investigator, upon all of us getting back, asked that we not talk with each other about the event. He wanted to get our independent testimony, which was wise. He wanted to make sure that we all saw the same thing and all reported the same thing. And he did. He independently took down all of our testimony that matched up, that aligned perfectly. We all saw the same UFO, the same erratic behavior, and we were unchanged. We were changed by that day. It was crazy.
What amount of time were you from top of the mesa where Eric's phone started acting up to
2 hours?
So that's a hell of a sequence of events.
Yeah.
For 2 hours of time.
And we get back, and here's the postscript. Not only did we all give matching independent testimony relative to the events of the day in that specific event, the next morning, the 6'6" security professional that had the experience out at Homestead 3 checked himself into the hospital, where he sat for weeks with an illness that no one could diagnose, that he described as the worst sickness he'd ever experienced in his life. He couldn't get up, couldn't walk. And this immediately followed the experience. I mean, that's a lot of correlating events that took place on that day. You have smartphone malfunction, rapid battery depletion, acute medical episodes.
For multiple people.
Yeah, multiple witnesses, a diversity of witnesses, including two who chose to leave the area, were so uncomfortable they did not want to stick around. And then a UFO sighting in broad daylight with multiple witnesses. All of those things that occurred in October 2016 changed my entire perspective. And from that point forward, I proceeded to not only allocate significant funds in order to establish the scientific platforms and the security necessary in order to study this property and to document the reality of the phenomena, but I was focused on bringing in the right team and expanding the team of professionals in order to understand the nature of what we were dealing with. Within months, we installed full security gated entrance with the guard shack that you see today. We had all of the power infrastructure upgraded, trenched, installed, fiber optic infrastructure put in place. We transformed, with the help of Thomas Winterton and contractors, the old dilapidated double-wide security trailer into a command center that still serves as a key point of research there on the ranch. And we proceeded to graduate from game cameras and very very basic surveillance cameras and tools to I think much more sophisticated platforms to monitor what is happening at the ranch. And the rest is history. Over the next year, we proceeded to take more data to document additional events, UFO activity and other high strangeness, and it propelled us forward. But as much as this property seems to be the center of gravity and is exhibiting the highest frequency of UFO activity and high strangeness, it covers the Uinta Basin. I mean, people out there have continued to have experiences. Even the oil and gas industry has had incidents occur relative to their sites out there, and there are a lot of professionals who have remained silent, have not wanted to go public, that are now finally reaching out to our team and letting their stories be told. These are firsthand accounts of activity that correlates with what we are seeing at Skinwalker Ranch.
Wow, this just continues to happen, just more and more.
Yeah, I think momentum's building. I mean, over the course of even this week, we revealed video taken of potentially what could be the first clear evidence of transmedium UAP, or transmedium, unidentified aerial phenomena that was captured coming down from the sky, dropping into the east field portion of the ranch, and then exiting right below the helicopter, caught on GoPro camera, exiting the mesa. There are countless events that have been documented, all involving an army of third-party professionals, experts, working in service to documenting and understanding the nature of what we are dealing with.
I mean, see, you got it in 2016. It started happening, I believe he said 6 months after the transaction.
Yeah. I personally had my UFO experience with multiple witnesses 6 months after acquiring the property, and we've progressed significantly since that time in terms of not only the scientific platforms, but also the amount of experts engaged. I mean, we've recently brought on as strategic partners Omnitech, led by CEO Jim Royston, who is the former executive director of the International Space Station National Lab. His partner and co-founder is retired 4-star General Lance Lord, former head of U.S. Space Command. Their team includes some of the most credentialed experts when it comes to sensor technology and data collection in a host of environments globally. I mean, these are platforms that have been deployed on the battlefield in a diversity of climates and environments that are now being brought to bear at Skinwalker Ranch and being deployed in service to understanding the nature of what we're doing. I don't know that has really sunk in with everyone. I mean, it's not just the fact that we brought the largest drone operating company in the country with Sky Elements to the table with over 200 drones for the drone experiment that resulted in what? Rapid battery depletion, GPS anomalies, all sorts of strange, never before experienced malfunctions, and then a UFO. I think a lot of people forget that a UFO ended up dropping out of the sky and appearing above 40 professionals.
Yeah.
Simultaneous with all of the drones malfunctioning. And then that UFO went back up into the sky and disappeared, didn't exit, was no longer seen, but it was clear as day to everyone present. You tell me, how hard would it be to get over 40 people to go on record with witnessing a UFO simultaneous with documenting rapid battery depletion, GPS anomalies, and a host of other strangeness? It's in my view, it's undeniable. I have a hard time understanding how people are skeptical when there is so much data.
They're not looking into it. They're not looking into it.
Well,
that's the only way.
Well,
after some of the things that you guys have documented and just plain as day, it's just, yeah. But going back a little bit, so after your experience, you immediately started putting together more of the team. You had
Right.
Eric Bard. Sounded like you had
Eric
Dragon.
Bard, principal investigator, Jim Morse, who, by the way, was my first big developer client when I was 18 years old.
Oh, really?
Jim was developing the towers at Southtown, multiple Class A office towers, a hotel, restaurants, right in the middle of the Salt Lake suburban market. And at 18, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to work on his projects. And when I got home from my mission at age 21, picked right back up where we left off, and Jim hired me to essentially continue the final phases of that project. One thing about Jim that I learned in being his broker and his advisor was his love for the Native American community and his commitment to raise millions of dollars for scholarships and aid for the tribes is something that I grew to really respect over the years. Decades before acquiring Skinwalker Ranch or having any idea that we would come together under these circumstances. When I flew out to see the ranch for the first time, having Jim as an advisor and appointing him as ranch manager seemed like a natural fit due to his strong relationships and respect for the tribes, for the Native American people. So you have Jim Morse, Thomas Winterton, who we engaged, who is a respected contractor, entrepreneur out in the basin, hotel owner at the time. Eric Bard, principal investigator, plasma physicist with patents to his name, and incredible credentials. Dragon, Brian Arnold, my head of security. Caleb Bench, who is a retired Marine, also part-time with law enforcement, with the county sheriff's department out there that has been given the latitude to work with us when he's not engaged with his law enforcement activities. We have a credentialed anthropologist, in fact, a published anthropologist in Candace Lindy, who is our ranch caretaker along with Tom Lewis. technologists that reside there full time, and then a host of other experts and professionals that have collaborated with us. Everyone from LIDAR, photogrammetry technicians, instrumented balloon and rocket professionals, to ground penetrating radar, and even environmental consultants in testing the property to help us understand whether we're dealing with something that still could be naturally impacted or affected.
How did Dr. Travis Taylor come on scene?
When it was funny, Travis Taylor was recommended by the History Channel.
Okay.
As a credentialed physicist that could come in and ask the hard questions and drive the team. Let me take you back in time. Following my own UFO experience in October 2016 and the months following, we ramped up the investigation aggressively with our team. We started consulting with other advisors, even staying in touch with the former scientists that had worked on the program in order to inform them what we were seeing and ask for any insight that they could render. By 2018, the command center had been taking documentation, had been, utilized with all of the camera surveillance, the sensors that we had in place, the FLIR camera system that we have deployed to monitor changes in the environment that are potentially unusual. And then one day I received a call from Washington, D.C. This is when my identity was still confidential, secret as owner. So I was surprised to receive the call, and the call was to come to Washington to provide a briefing, an update relative to my ownership and stewardship in follow-up to the activities of the previous owner. We flew out to D.C. and we're happy to provide a briefing and update them on the reality of what was happening at the ranch. Again, UFO activity, acute medical episodes, especially multiple acute medical episodes that had occurred along with those reports. The electromagnetic anomalies that had been carefully documented, and some of the other strangeness that defied any conventional explanation. About that time, I was also receiving calls through Jim Morse and Thomas Winterton from producers of the History Channel wanting to meet with the owner to discuss a docuseries, the ability to come in and document the events occurring on this piece of property. Word was starting to get out that there was an ongoing investigation. There were photos that were leaked online that showed that there was a security presence there and that there was a very sophisticated effort. And producers of the History Channel were hell-bent on getting an audience with whoever this mysterious owner was in order to pitch the opportunity to have a docuseries effort that would record and document what was happening on a day-to-day basis. They reached out for over a year. So for over a year, on a weekly basis, I was being hounded by my people to at least consider potentially responding to the phone calls. And after a year, I reluctantly agreed to the meeting, subject to a confidentiality agreement being signed by everyone. Producers flew in. We had a discussion. I said, number one, condition. If I were to consider this, number one, it has to be true. Nothing can be faked, manipulated, or contrived. I have no interest in being part of some ghost hunters type effort with a bunch of guys tripping over themselves in the dark with night vision. This has to be true. And I have to have final cut on everything if we were to do anything. Number two, you have to use my team. We're not having any Hollywood casting call. We're not bringing in individuals from the outside that could potentially compromise the integrity of the scientific investigation that I've been privately funding to the tune of millions of dollars up until that point. And number 3 was that my identity needed to remain confidential. I had no interest in being on television. I didn't want my name associated with it. Again, even my family at the time had no idea that I owned the ranch, along with business partners and others.
Why were you so hell-bent on everything being confidential?
I did not want my ownership of this property or the topics associated with Skinwalker Ranch to in any way divert from or compromise or undermine my professional endeavors, my commercial real estate practice, and other entrepreneurial activity. As chairman of the largest commercial real estate enterprise in the Intermountain West, representing Fortune 500 companies, and working closely with the governor's office and other agencies, I did not want this project with Skinwalker Ranch to in any way detract from the decades of work to serve clients and to transform the skylines of our communities. I felt a great responsibility to my clients, and I didn't know if it would be taken well by my clients. I didn't know how people would react, and I had no interest. I didn't want any attention, and wanted to fiercely protect the professional side of my life, and didn't want these two worlds to collide. Well, it was funny. The gentleman I met with at the time, Kevin Burns, who was the president of Prometheus Entertainment, who was kind of the number one production company for History Channel at the time. I mean, of course, he's the creator of Ancient Aliens, The Curse of Oak Island, Beyond Oak Island, The Unexplained with William Shatner. You know, had launched a series on Netflix, Lost in Space, big budget sci-fi epic. He's a genius. He's a very talented producer. Looked at me and he said, "Look, you talk about integrity. You want the truth to get out there. You're an experiencer. Yet you aren't willing to put your name behind this. How are people going to believe the truth? How are they going to believe the authenticity and genuine nature of what you're doing if you yourself aren't willing to go public as part of this effort?" And he had a point. He essentially Jedi mind tricked me into agreeing to go public. I told him, I said, "You know this is going to turn my world upside down.
That's
You
a
understand?
That's a hell of a gamble on your part.
Yeah. And it's a greater liability. No one understands what a liability this is. I have yet to take a penny personally relative to these efforts. I've never opened a bank account for Adamantium Real Estate, for the entity that controls the ranch. I have purposely donated, assigned any proceeds that would be due to me to other causes, from scholarships, to cancer research. I have no interest in taking a penny relative to this endeavor. And
So
I
all
really
profit coming to you from this show goes to charity.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Charity and other efforts. I mean, we have used some funds in order to help bolster the infrastructure that have gone to vendors, but no money, not one penny has made its way into my pocket personally by design.
That's incredible.
And I want the truth more than anyone. And I'm willing to put my money and obviously my reputation where my mouth is. This really is a greater liability to me than an asset. And I'm hell-bent on getting the truth. As I stated earlier, I'm not a believer. I'm an experiencer. I can't unsee that which I have witnessed with multiple witnesses at my side and have continued to document over the last 7 years. What we are seeing at Skinwalker Ranch is real. And it has the ability to completely change the way we look at the world, our place in the universe, and how we view reality.
Back to DC. They called you in for some type of a briefing. How receptive were they?
Very. They're very receptive, very respectful. We preceded the briefing with me, preparing with the team, with Eric Bard, and at the time, Dr. Jim Segala, who was participating in the first year of our docuseries, and another senior advisor. We proceeded to present a full keynote PowerPoint presentation, and it was very evident that those individuals who held high levels of position, of seniority, were respectful and took this seriously and had knowledge that these things are real.
Who exactly were you briefing? Was it the Senate Intelligence Committee or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was a good opportunity for me to demonstrate how serious I took my stewardship of the property, and the fact that we are using scientific discipline and rigor in order to address these topics and the phenomena at the ranch. I tell people all the time, I use the word steward. I really believe that this is a stewardship, not just an ownership. And having a collaborative partnership with people who can bring skills and resources to the table to better understand what is happening is a key, a hallmark of our investigation.
Has the Intelligence Committee at the Senate offered any funding or any assistance?
I haven't asked for any. I don't have any interest. I have no interest in asking for money, engaging the government. I've never held a security clearance.
Okay.
I don't have any interest in that type of formal engagement. I am interested in being transparent and collaborative with anyone, including the general public. I mean, the docuseries is my effort to disclose to the public the reality of our investigation as it unfolds. And that is perhaps one of the most exciting parts of this effort, this endeavor that I would have never anticipated, is the opportunity to allow the public a view behind the scenes as the investigation progresses. Show me another effort on the planet where there's a 24-hour live stream for the public to access, where there is more collaboration and more open disclosure and presentation of events, of data and activity. I don't believe there has ever been an effort like this.
I don't either. So History Channel got a hold of you. You guys made the negotiation, and the docuseries started. Travis Taylor got introduced.
Yeah. So.
You had placed every member on that team, correct?
Right.
You had vetted
until that time, until the docuseries effort, and the History Channel, they didn't require it. They suggested it. They said we'd like to suggest bringing in one person, a physicist, a credentialed physicist, who is a skeptic who will challenge the team. And I wasn't excited. The team had no interest in bringing in another member of the family. I mean, they didn't want to bring someone in to potentially ruin the dynamic that we had created. But we flew everyone out to Los Angeles to meet with Dr. Taylor and production. And I was pleasantly surprised at how qualified Dr. Taylor. I mean, 2 PhDs in physics. He has multiple master's degrees. He's a published author. He's worked with NASA, with Army intelligence. He's worked on classified programs. I was impressed with his credentials. Anyone who looks at his profile, at his credentials, and scoffs, they're being disingenuous.
It came out later on the docuseries that he was on the UFO task force for the Pentagon.
Right. Well,
which flew under the radar for you and the rest of your team.
It was shocking. And it frankly pissed off several members of my team. They felt betrayed to a degree for a while. The fact that Dr. Taylor had taken a position as the chief scientist for the UAP task force at the Pentagon and had not disclosed to the team what was going on and that he was working in that capacity was a significant concern. We had to talk through that. And Dr. Taylor, who was called on the carpet, to essentially account for the situation, said that, look, after it became known that he was consulting with Skinwalker Ranch, he was part of our effort, a senior official with the Pentagon reached out to him and asked him to engage, but made him do so under certain confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements. He was under oath to not disclose the nature or his involvement with the UAP task force. And I have to respect the fact that he kept that confidence.
How did that make you feel? Let's just take Travis out of the equation. You had already gone to D.C., you'd briefed the Senate Intelligence Committee, and now they have an asset unannounced to you working at your property that you're funding the experiments on. And how long? That went on for what, 2-3 years?
3 years, yeah.
3 years, you didn't know. And then it gets disclosed.
Yeah.
How did that, and by the way,
it was mind-blowing.
There's also all this surveillance going on with what, 1.6 gigahertz, I believe, and you have the planes flying very obvious surveillance patterns over the ranch. You have Blackhawks, you have Chinooks flying around all the time.
Covert military surveillance seems to be a constant.
And so how did that make you feel, knowing that you had an asset of the U.S. government involved in your investigation?
Mixed feelings at the time. I respected the fact that Travis did keep it confidential. The fact that he didn't pull anyone aside and whisper to them what he was doing speaks to his integrity. I think that's important. That's important no matter how it looks. The reality is he kept his oaths. He did not violate his NDAs, even when he was probably under a lot of pressure, feeling like he probably should. And I'm sure he desperately wanted to disclose it. So I have to respect his integrity. I also have to point out that Travis Taylor is not the principal investigator. The chief scientist at Skinwalker Ranch, going on 7 years, is Eric Bard. Eric Bard is the one who lives at Skinwalker Ranch, who lives in the command center full-time, has structured the platforms, is conducting the scientific investigation and leading it. Dr. Taylor, while an important member of the team and someone that I respect, I actually love Dr. Taylor. I think he's been an incredible influence and asset to us. He's a consulting physicist, and he's there to aid the team, but he's not manipulating the investigation. I can say with absolute certainty he has not manipulated the data, the science, or anything else relative to the ranch. He's been a very supportive participant and physicist that has been a great complementary fit with Eric and the team. Wasn't always that way. We had a few months at the very beginning that were a little rocky as everyone was kind of trying to find their footing. Dragon, for example, took issue with feeling marginalized and felt talked down to at times by Dr. Taylor and other scientists. And there's always a period of time when people are trying to build relationships of trust with each other, and starting this effort was no different. But yeah, I have not been as concerned with what transpired, simply because I respect the fact that Dr. Taylor didn't breach any of his oaths or NDAs, and he hasn't been the one directing the science investigation. He's been a great complement and supporter.
Last part of the history that I want to talk about is we spoke a little bit last night about remote viewing and some studies that Stanford was doing, and how does that tie in with Skinwalker Ranch?
I believe that consciousness plays a role, and consciousness studies will play a role in understanding the nature of what we are dealing with at Skinwalker Ranch. I think the remote viewing, practice or phenomena, I believe has validity to it. We've had a number of gifted intuitives that have consulted with our research. We have avoided some of that with respect to the documentary series, as we're still gathering data, and some of it is inconclusive. A lot of it is very controversial. But I think that the nature of our consciousness and really the world around us has yet to truly be understood.
Do you want to talk about any of those studies that haven't been released yet?
No, I think we'll be addressing those in the future.
Okay.
But
Let's talk about Skinwalker Ranch. Did you have any affiliation with that?
Yeah, I was asked by Bigelow to target Skinwalker Ranch when he owned it. I guess he owned it. I'm not sure if he owned it or...
From my understanding, Robert Bigelow owned it previous to Brandon Fugal.
Right. That's right. This is back when he owned it. And he asked me if I needed to go there, and I said, no, I don't need to go to Skinwalker Ranch. He asked me what was going on there, and I said, I suspect there's something bizarre going on there that no one's faced before. But then there's lots of places like that all over the planet. And it's going to take an involved amount of study. You're going to have to spend a lot of time there and do a lot of things you might not want to do. It's going to be expensive. And as soon as I said that, well, can I hire you to come out and take care of that? No. Because I'll never live where you live. I'll put it that way. I think he's an interesting guy. I think he's got a lot of interest in different things that he's trying to accomplish, and I wish him all the luck in the world. But I don't need to be part of it. And I kind of blew it off a little bit. I did some remote viewing for him, but I didn't come up with anything significant. So I think he and I just decided to go our separate ways. I think they're over excited and over exercising themselves over this ranch. I think there's probably some bizarre stuff happening there, but it has more to do with its location than it does anything else. There might be, I don't know, huge electromagnetic deformity there in some way that affects machines and cows and people and whatever. But I don't think it's anything UFO related or mysteriously related to anything.
All right, Brandon, we're back from the break. I want to get into the triangle section of Skinwalker Ranch, where they say is a possible wormhole or black hole or portal, or what do you think it is?
I don't know. The honest answer, I'm not sure exactly what it is, other than there is obviously an anomaly. There is something in that area, in that region, and in that airspace that causes GPS to malfunction.
I mean, when you say GPS malfunctions, you're talking the GPS is telling you you are in one location, but you're actually in a it's not even
Correct.
close.
Or it just completely malfunctions and does not operate. Think about it. We've had instrumented balloon, helicopter, airplane, and advanced rocketry experiments with sensors, along with drones, sophisticated drones, that have all malfunctioned above the triangle in that region of the property. Lunasonde, who is a defense contractor, has a very sophisticated platform in looking at that area, even saw anomalies in that region of the triangle and the mesa. There have been instances where time has been manipulated, where we've seen, the time itself, there's been a shift
What do you mean by
a
that?
quarter a second, where the data ends up being altered or manipulated to a degree that is not easily explainable. I mean, it is baffling to all of the experts. Everyone who comes out to the property and sees what unfolds ends up scratching their heads. And to have the best LiDAR, photogrammetry, and other experts that continuously see these strange things occur somewhat simultaneous with UFO or UAP activity as well. I mean, we had a situation above the triangle where we were launching rockets, of course, one of numerous occasions, and a prominent UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, ends up appearing, and then what happens within minutes following? The Black Hawk helicopter comes right over the mesa, descends over the property, and just hovers right over the south field. This isn't above the men. This is right there, low hover above the field south of Homestead 1 and the command center. This is late night, unmarked, not transponding, and as the men would describe it, I mean, it was a menacing presence on that property immediately following a UFO sighting. For whatever reason, that region of the property, that region of the triangle, which is not far away from where I saw the UFO, the 40 to 50 foot long gray silverish disc appear and maneuver in extraordinary ways, seems to be a hot spot, seems to be a center of gravity for activity within an expanse of property that is hosting a diversity of incidents and activities. So that's what I think drives a lot of our investigation and a lot of the experimental activity. It's the data that we continue to gather from the triangle, from the homesteads, from the mesa, that is driving us forward.
How would you? So there's been a number of events that have happened through your guys' experiments within the triangle, and it sounds like the triangle. Well, it's an actual triangle on the ground, and then it seems to be some type of an invisible force field, maybe I would call it.
No, that region of the property, I mean, you see kind of this triangular formation, or really the triangular roadway system that kind of comes together at that point. But it does seem to be a focal point there along the Mesa Plateau, and it is a central point as you look at the ranch relative to the, where the command center and Homestead 1 is in relation to the homesteads out on the far west side of the property. The anomaly that we've seen, the people call it the blob, but this thing that they've caught on camera, and it's not just from one point of view, it's been from multiple camera points of view and different types of recording devices, different types of cameras that have recorded this thing, this anomaly, as Dr. Taylor would call it, appears to disrupt the experimental activities that occur. It deflects. We've seen rockets deflected. I mean, in that area, we launched balloons. You probably remember early in the docuseries effort, we had a professor from the University of Alabama at Huntsville that came out who is an expert, instrumented balloon experimentalist and operator. And we never recovered the primary balloon. The primary balloon they set up right above the triangle. It literally disappeared. And it disappeared right at the moment that it started registering elevated activity. When the meters started going off, all of a sudden, it disappeared and it has never been recovered. And we've searched. I mean, we've conducted exhaustive searches of the area, looked at all of the surrounding property, via the helicopter, even on the ground, and have never found a trace of where that balloon could have ended up. And
Wow, I didn't realize that you guys never found it.
No.
It seems to be that
it just disappeared.
from 31 feet to 300 feet seems to be the.
Yeah, and it's transient.
Okay.
It's not constant. I mean, it comes and goes. There's something very unpredictable in some respects, but the fact that we've had even lasers bend. You probably remember when they were conducting the experiments and actually had a laser pointed up, and the laser was documented as bending, as essentially being deflected off a space. To this day, those who have looked at that footage, looked at that data, remain just baffled by what they've recorded. Even the UFO sightings that have occurred above the triangle in tandem with some of these experimental activities not only continue, but they've been prominent. I think it's not lost on anyone that the object that was seen coming out of the base of the mesa, that large orb or whatever, unidentified aerial phenomena that exited the mesa, was not far from that region. I mean, it all is essentially interconnected.
Yeah.
It's an interesting center of gravity for a lot of the phenomena, and that's why we continue to launch rockets and experiments, even focus the helicopter and other craft in that area with the instrumentation, and we'll see what we are able to ultimately uncover. I think taking all of that data cumulatively and having that essentially paint a picture or pull together this grand tapestry that we can then step back from and look at, the patterns. One of the things we brought Omnitech on for is their artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities. I mean, they have AI and ML patterns, or AI and ML platforms that will be able to better identify potential patterns that are occurring that'll help us, I think, weed out, separate the signal from the noise, separate that which may be a foreign adversary or even some naturally caused phenomena from something that is truly unusual.
You know, the so many things have happened above the triangle, and I think the first thing that I saw that got me was, I believe it was your brother was flying the helicopter over it, and I can't remember what altitude he was at, but it said his altimeter said I believe it was 40 feet. And
Right.
He was several hundred feet.
Yeah. Well, it essentially was bouncing. The radar altimeter was identifying something 40 to 50 feet below the helicopter when he's thousands of feet up in the air, when he's 5,000 feet above the triangle. And it was tracking with the helicopter. And a lot of people have tried to either debunk or try to explain what was documented during that exercise. There really is no satisfactory explanation for it. I mean, we've consulted with the manufacturer. I mean, he's called his resources. My brother, he has over 9,000 hours of flight time. Is one of the most seasoned aviators in the region, and he knows this equipment inside out. I mean, he consults with the experts relative to how it operates and what he should expect and what is to really what could be involved, and there's really no explanation exactly for what occurred there, and it's disturbing. Well, after that flight, Cameron was really hesitant as to whether he wanted to come back on the property again.
Really?
Because it's just the danger associated with, the instruments, with the fact that there's something up in the air tracking with the helicopter that is unseen. Well, and we saw, most recently, the high-speed camera operator captured a big silver, looked like a metallic object, but some type of silver spherical object that was tracking behind the helicopter with one of the more recent exercises being conducted. And a lot of people say, oh, well, they were applying a filter, because there was a filter applied in order to bring out some of the features of that a little bit more prominently. But it doesn't negate the fact that it was there. I mean, I've seen unfiltered, footage of that, and there is definitely an object. There's a round spherical object that is tracking with the helicopter during that exercise. And this is not a drone. This isn't something that we can assign some either natural cause to or point to some known technology. It seems very unusual.
The other thing that really caught my attention, probably more than anything, is the GPS trackers that they were dropping out of the helicopter.
Right.
With the streamers. And it seemed to be almost bouncing off an invisible object. Like they would fall like this and just bounce off of nothing.
Yeah. End up in a completely different region of the ranch. Yeah. And they're being deflected off of something. And that speaks to the fact that we believe that there is some anomaly. There is some irregular, whether it be an object or field or something that we truly can't explain, but is real, that has a tangible impact on the experiments, whether it be the rockets, whether it be the sensors, the GPS, the bottle drop experiment, for example.
The flamethrower.
Yeah, the flamethrower where it split.
That went around nothing. The flame turned into a horseshoe, went around nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the rockets, the laser beams, the LiDAR.
Yeah, how do you explain that?
The helicopter being pushed around.
Yeah.
The plane. I mean, it's the drones. What was it, 250 drones you guys lifted out?
Yeah, over 200 drones, fully charged, carefully calibrated, with over 20 experts from Sky Elements who conduct more of these drone exercises across the country than any other company. I mean, they are the experts. They are the gold standard, left completely baffled. And they went on record with the fact that they've never seen anything like this occur. That their equipment completely malfunctioned in the area of the triangle and on the ranch. We're going to be bringing them back. What do? When you're conducting a scientific investigation, when you're trying to follow the scientific method, you repeat. You repeat the experiment, you gather more data. We're trying in service to coming to some conclusion or drawing a more, I think, a more accurate hypothesis. We're trying to gather more data and repeat these experiments to see if we observe similar phenomena or other anomalies that occur. And we're active with that. At first, I was hesitant to deploy the helicopter. You have a very expensive piece of equipment. I have my brother, who I love. I don't want him in harm's way. But he's become much like Thomas Winterton, who, when faced with danger, when faced with the risks, and even having a personal set of experiences dealing with this, instead of running away or deciding to sit this one out, he's saying, bring it on. He's saying, this is discovery. This is frontier science discovery. Only the bold end up being able to really pierce through and to realize extraordinary results. I said earlier in our interview, in order to get extraordinary results, you have to put forth extraordinary effort. I was using that as a business reference, that it takes sacrifice to get results. And this ranch investigation is no different. I think we're all sacrificing. We're all locking arms and trying to determine the nature of what is happening. It isn't a function of proving that there's something happening. That's already done. It's being able to identify the origin and the identity associated with the phenomena that drives me. And I think you can expect to see in the future, hopefully, some communication. I think whatever we're dealing with is highly intelligent. I will not be surprised if at some point we are able to somehow determine how to communicate, or at least see, I think, more intelligent interaction.
So you think this? What do you call this?
Well, those who came before me with the Bigelow team called it a precognitive nonsense. What are they? There's a term. They refer to the phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch as a precognitive, sentient, non-human intelligence.
So there's
an intelligence. Based on the data, there is an intelligence operating on that ranch that has command over space, time, over consciousness, can manipulate closed systems in a split second without leaving a trace, and I believe has the ability to communicate if we can understand or develop a common language at some point to be able to interact. Eric Bard, in particular, has had communication with at least one of these entities involved with manipulating the systems, that has command over the technology and the platforms, and has expounded on that a little bit. He'll be, I think, addressing that a bit more in the future. We're going to be discussing it on the docuseries this next year. But he's definitely seen and documented evidence that we're dealing with an intelligence that does have the desire to communicate.
What? Can you go into the communication a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, in his case, when he asked out of frustration for a sign, when he commanded when the systems were being manipulated and he was dealing with security violations that were occurring repeatedly with our surveillance cameras, he literally asked verbally out loud, if you have something to show me, show me. If you have something to tell me, tell me. And in that instant, the screen morphed, melted, and digitally composed letters. He had the presence of mind, just as he did in October 2016, to screen capture what was happening with his iPhone. Thank heavens he proceeded to record and screen capture in real time what was happening with the equipment. And what was revealed was what I believe to be compelling evidence that we're dealing with an intelligence that is at least willing to acknowledge and wants their presence known.
Were you able to translate it into anything?
Yeah, it'll be shown on television, but it essentially had the simple response, again, instantaneously, of I living.
You're shitting me.
So
Whoa.
Eric Bard, in response to a host of issues with the security cameras registering that there was something triggering the motion sensors, that there were countless events occurring. Upon giving that command, saw the entire screen morph and form the letters I living, and then snap back. All documented, all caught on camera. That has yet to be fully addressed on the docuseries, but is going to be addressed in the future. And it's really his story to tell, but if he were here, he'd be telling you the same story. It was compelling evidence that we're dealing with an intelligence on the ranch that has the ability to manipulate technology and systems instantaneously, and has the ability to communicate, and has intention. There's volition.
Wow. That is
It's spooky.
It is.
When you see the image, it's spooky.
Can we display the image, or do we need to
disturbing.
wait for the next season?
No, I think I'll give you the image.
Thank
you can
you.
show it, but I think that the greater story and the context and all the circumstances will be unfolded, and the related documentation. But I'd be happy to share it. In fact, if you want to show it on the screen right now,
I would love to.
you're welcome to put it up. But it is a compelling image and evidence of technology, manipulation, and intelligence that transcends anything that had been documented before that
Wow.
time at Skinwalker Ranch.
That is definitely spooky. Moving on. So let me give you a quick introduction. Once again, Congressman Tim Burchett, Congressman of Tennessee, District 2 since 2019. You started in local politics. You're the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee.
For 8 years.
You're Southern Baptist, got into state politics, and now you're at the federal level, obviously in Congress since 2019. And you were the catalyst behind the first ever UFO congressional hearing, which is what we're dying to dig into today. So,
They don't have to know. They just know they can't talk about it.
yeah. It seems like a lot of things started happening right around 1947, and a lot of people believe that the Germans had some type of advanced technology. Let's get into Project Blue Book.
Okay.
What is Project Blue Book?
Project Blue Book was by the Air Force, and they analyzed. It was an official government program, and they went around and interviewed and analyzed UFO sightings and things like that. And they were is pretty inconclusive. I mean, there's a couple of guys driving around interviewing folks. There's one right up here in Kentucky that happened. There was the little people of Kentucky, Hopkinsville, I think. You can read about it. But there's all these things they analyzed and stuff, and they really they didn't come with any conclusions. And a lot of people think it was a lot of false flags too, stuff that was put out there to, and they were meant to never find anything.
You think that was a?
I think the people that knew, yeah, let's send them out there on this thing. They're not going to show them anything. We've already got it all wrapped up.
So it was a cover.
I think, but I think the people involved in it were genuinely concerned, and I just don't. You have a government that's told us at least since 47 these things don't exist, but now they're telling us they exist, and they want your money. That's the other thing. They want our money. They want government, the Pentagon, NASA. Everybody's going to want money to study these things. In the Pentagon report, I think it's 56 pages. Read the first paragraph, and it said we're going to use. I think it used the word robust. I don't know if it's robust resources or whatever to study these things. It's all about money.
Yeah.
It's taken from you and me to keep them in power.
I mean, the government's definitely very interested in it. I mean, do you know who Brandon Fugal is by chance, owner of Skinwalker Ranch?
Yeah. I know all about that. Sure.
I mean, they have what they believe is government intimidation happening. They keep flying Blackhawks and CH-47s over the property. They found out one of the members on the scientific team, Travis Taylor, is a plant from the Pentagon who is on the UFO, I can't remember what program. Do you know anything about that stuff?
Yeah.
What do you know about it?
Well, see, that's where I go back. I just don't trust anybody in this thing. I mean, I just want to get it all out there, and then let's decide. I was so I get a call from somebody, and they want to come talk to me in the office. And I was like, well, that's cool. Okay, whatever. We'll set it up. And they come in, and I recognize some of the folks. And there's more than one there. And I get introduced to everybody. And I said, well, who's that back there? And they said, he's not here. And I said, okay. So I don't know. That got me a little. And sometimes these guys won't come in the building to see me. So I don't know if it's if they're government entities that, that are trying to, X-file me, claiming, they're going to give me a bunch of garbage, and so that I'll come out with it and discredit me. That's why I just put it, I don't care. I'll tell you everything that I know, mostly, that I can tell you. And then, and so it's just, to me, it's...
who are these people?
Okay, well, back to the... Wait a minute, hang on a second, the Skinwalker thing. So they said, there's some people who'd like to come see you. And I said, okay. And I don't watch all these TV shows. Mm-hmm. I just don't. Because it's just a rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. It's like, going down this, we're gonna find it. This next week we're gonna do this, and then next week it's, it's like the Oak Island mystery, It's like the most watched show on History Channel. But every year it's like, we get there and then, we'll see y'all next year, It's like Who Shot JR?
Yeah.
And so it's showing my age. But so I get it. They said, these guys wanted to come see me. And I said, well, that'd be great. I said, just tell them come on up to the office. No, they don't want to come to the office.
Was this the Skinwalker crowd? Okay.
So... See, you blew my deal there. I was going to spring it on you, so you go, wow. So I'm at my house. It's a Saturday, and they come in. And I hit the gate button. They're inside, and I get out, and I look at them, and I go, dadgum, that's the guys from that TV show. And they came in, and I gave them all a Dr. Pepper, and we watched some stuff, and we talked about some stuff. But, there's a lot of competition within the UFO community, too. There's a lot of people selling books, and a lot of people have podcasts, and there's a lot of animosity between the groups. And I see my job not as taking sides, because I don't know what the truth is really on all of it. I know there's something else out there, and I know that some of it's a diversion, some of it's a false flag, but some of it, a guy I've known most of my adult life told me about an incident that happened to him in the Navy. He saw me on the one of the UFO shows or something, and he called me, and he told me about an incident. This thing flew over them they were on a let's see, what's a tin can? You're the Navy guy. Is that the destroyer?
Oh, I never spent any time on a ship.
Okay, well, good. Okay, well, anyway, they were out in, I believe, the Mediterranean, and this thing just flew over the top of them. Just out, it said as big as he said, I swear to you, it was 2 blocks wide if it was a foot. And he said said they saw it coming in, and it had the dome on the top, and it was saucer shaped. And he said it just stayed above them, no noise, and they just stood there and looked at it, and it just took off like that, no noise. And then they were just like, "What the heck was that?" And then they get back in port, and here comes the guys in the suits, telling us it's a national security issue. You're not to talk about this. You'll go to the federal penitentiary. You'll see you down at Leavenworth for the rest of your dadgum lives. And they said, and we mean it, don't talk about this to anybody.
Wow.
And here it happened in the 50s. And, and the guy that called me, and he's since called me back again. And he told me the same story. I mean, it was identical. Everything he said was identical. It reminded me of my mama. You ask her what time it was, she'd tell you how to make the clock, before she'd give you the time. And it was that kind of detail. He told me the weather, what was going on around him, where he was standing, just everything. It was just too specific. And again, you can see all this footage of all these different things. Why would he lie to me?
Yeah.
Why would Gordo Cooper, one of the most famous Apollo astronauts of all time, he describes an incident where you said Wright-Patterson. They filmed, you can watch the videos, and he describes it. He said they're sitting there, and they filmed it. A craft comes in, a saucer, landing gear comes out. It does. And I'm not sure if anybody got out of it. I'm not sure I can't remember all of it, and then landing gear goes up, it takes off. And they're like, just what the hell was that? And they filmed it, sent it to Wright-Pat. They called the next day, and they said, we don't know what you're talking about. Now, this guy, the original Apollo astronauts, they're heroes. Those guys, everybody knew who they were. Everybody, they had trading cards. They gave them Corvettes. He could have walked into any sizzling steakhouse in the world, and they'd have bought him the best steak in the house. He'd go into any bar, everybody buy him a beer. This guy, Gordo Cooper, man, he was in the right stuff. They talked about it. He was portrayed in it. But, I can, all these photos and stuff, but when a guy like that says something,
Yeah.
to me, that means it.
Well, you've met, I'm fairly certain you've met everybody I know within the UFO, UAP crowd. What kind of stuff were you talking about with the Skinwalker bunch?
They had some footage, and they talked about, I'd ask them where they thought it came from and the different, and one of them said some things to me I wasn't skeptical of. It was just, it was, and I wouldn't even call it on the fringe, but I hear it talked about, and I don't really put much into all that.
What was it?
Just, the grays, the different aliens and things, and they were talking about where they possibly came from, and
where did they think they came from?
There was a solar system outside of ours, and I can't even remember the name of it now. But again, that doesn't really fit into my thing. If we've got, show me the dadgum footage, and then we'll figure out that from there, because there's no way you're talking about something that's traveled light years to get here. That's beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
And there's people that think that they think themselves there. They're so far advanced that they can think themselves there. And, you know, I'm not critical of anybody's beliefs on that stuff because it doesn't affect what I think is my job as a congressman, is to get the facts out there. Just show the footage. If you got bodies, show it to us. If you got the saucers, show us the dadgum saucers. I think the American public needs to see that stuff.
What do they gain out of making contact with you? I mean, we just kind of went over what they're talking to you about, but what's the point? Why are they coming to?
I think that I can get it out, and that's what I worry about. Somebody within one of these government agencies trying to discredit me by giving me false information, because we get. I dare say I've had hundreds of calls from people, and people will send me photos of, you know, I can't see anything in it. And some of them look fairly legit, but it could be AI generated. I don't know. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and somebody will say, look at my YouTube video of this and that and me talking about this. You know, I just don't have time. I'm a congressman. I've got constituents. I got VA issues. I got dog barking issues. You know, I've got everything. I mean, it's yeah, I have nearly about 8 counties, 7 and a sliver off of 1. You know, I represent a lot of people, and there's a lot of issues, and so I have to deal with all that. And I've got people have been very kind to send me nice books about UFOs, stuff they've written, their encounters, and, you know, and I try to glance through them and put them on, and I've got a collection of them now.
Yeah,
and they all have real nice inscriptions. Apparently, that somebody, I won't say my stature, but somebody in Congress would actually talk about this has validated them, I think, in some ways, and I think that's cool. If I could provide somebody a little hope, and more than half the population believes something else out there, I'd say that's probably a lot more than that, even that in the polls show, just because people don't trust polls and are afraid to answer them.
Yeah. I mean, who else have you met with? I believe you met with Dr. Stephen Greer as well.
I know Stephen pretty well. He came over and he sent me a nice book, which I have looked at. Had dinner with him one day. He's jacked. He's a pretty muscular guy. Louis Elizondo, whatever. I can't ever say his name.
What did Stephen Greer want to talk to you about?
Just about how he's involved with. This is what he tells me, that some military outfits that are going in and going to get some of these craft, get them out, and more or less. And, you know, I don't know. I don't know. Civilians are messing with special ops. I don't know. I mean, they're operators. I don't know what all's going on with that. But he talked to me a little bit about that and some other things. And
what is it that he wants you to do with that information?
I don't know, other than just to know it and just share it maybe, and to say that it's real. But he has a different, you know, everybody has a different belief in this thing.
Yeah.
And there again, I just believe something else is out there. I don't get into all that. I don't condemn them for it. You know, I've got buddies of mine that are Jewish. I got buddies of mine that are Hindu. I've got some Muslim friends. You know, I don't condemn them. Maybe not believe it because I'm a Christian, but I don't condemn them for it. I don't think it's my job to do that or stand in judgment. But I usually just, honestly, I just contain it. Mm-hmm. I just put it in my head, and then because really all I see my job as a congressman is just to be transparent, just to get it out there.
Yeah.
And by doing so, I think I validate a lot of people. Because a lot of these folks get abused about this stuff, and they're afraid to say anything about it. Mm-hmm. You know, I walked on elevator, I walked on airplanes, and I walked by first class. I remember this dude was sitting there, and he was pretty well put together. You could tell that you know, I'm sitting in the middle of my wardrobe right now. You could tell that guy, he was dressed pretty well, and he was sitting there, and he was kind of confident. You can kind of dig the vibe, what they're up to. I can. When somebody, and he says, Congressman. I go, yes, sir. You know, about that UAP issue. It was early on. I thought he was going to give me one of those. Don't we have anything better to do? Or don't you, you know, and honestly, it's in the purview. I didn't choose this issue. It kind of chose me. You know, Kevin McCarthy came to me and said, I said something to him about it, and he came to me and said, look, it's your baby. Or, you know, That's what Chairman Comer said. And so, walking by this cat, he's about that UAP issue. And I thought, well, here it comes. He said, really appreciate you looking into that. And I go, really? He said, yeah. He said, have you ever had some sort of encounter? He goes, yeah, I have. He said, I can't explain it. I said, all right, thank you. And I get that a lot. Used to be when I was, I used to kind of be in Tennessee, I wasn't the patron saint. I don't know what you call it, but mental health was my issue. And I brought it up everywhere I went. And I always knew after it was over with, it was always the person you never suspected. Say, hey, my kid's got an issue with this, or my wife does, or my husband does, or I do, or whatever, and I appreciate you bringing it up. Now it's the same way with the UFO issue or UAP.
Wow.
And it's, I can walk through a mall, and people cut up and make fun of it, and they'll say something. I've had congressmen say something, hey, Burchett, are you going to fly off on a UFO or something? Smart aleck like that, and I just laugh, I don't care. And I'm walking, and then they'll circle around and go, hey, man, I was just kidding about that. Man, when I was a kid one time, I was standing out in the middle of a field, and this thing came over me, and I said, I swear to you, I still to this day. I mean, I've had multiple Congress people tell me this.
Wow.
And I've had civic leaders, and it's from all over. And people will call me from all over the country. And they're same as you or me, military, a lot of military people. Had a guy tell me one time he was on a fishing boat, and it kind of reminded me, he described the craft as the same, similar as the one that I was talking to. He said this, and he described where he was. I think he was out on the Gulf Coast, and a lot of activity seemed to be Gulf Coast centered, near Eglin and all that down there. So he said they were fishing, and he described the boat, and that they were going after, and him and his buddy, and he was in the Air Force at the time, and they were off duty or whatever, and they saw this craft just fly over him. He said, and when he was describing it, I could, my mind's eye, I pictured it, and it didn't make a noise, and then they heard this, and he described whatever F-16, because he was a pilot, and he said it was two F-16s or whatever chasing it, and he remember he said, I sort of thought, I said those F-16s are about 100. I mean, he's described that they were very minuscule in size compared to this thing, and then it just took off, and it didn't make a noise, and then those jets were just still and he said after it was over with, he thought about it, he sort of laughed internally because he's like, what the heck are they going to do to that thing?
Yeah.
And so this is a guy called me, and this actual incident was written up in it's called one of these UFO groups written it up as one of their top sightings of the decade or something. This was way back, I think maybe in the 70s or something that this occurred. But it's just every day, brother. Every day. I try to return all my calls that people call me, but it's almost I just can't. I just got too many of those.
Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of. I can't imagine you have the bandwidth to go through all of that.
I find that the most interesting part of this whole subject, but it quickly you have to be you go into crazy town way too quickly with a lot of people out there who don't know enough to talk about it intelligently, in my opinion. But it's also dangerous, and here's why it's dangerous. Those capabilities can be technologically stimulated to occur. It's like the Skinwalker Ranch. After a certain cell of this covert group got hold of that thing, they started setting up phenomena there. It's absolutely man-made, high-end electronics, but interdimensional. It's like the show Stranger Things. I've never seen it, but that's based on some weird stuff that went on at Montauk, out on eastern Long Island, the Montauk projects. And we know what those are. I know guys who've been in laboratories where they have a toroid or one of these devices, and suddenly they're pulling in spooky-looking creatures that look like they came out of the ninth ring of hell, and they literally become 3D and are running around the lab. Weird stuff. All right, so the high end of the WSFM is this sort of thing. But that can be used in a deceptive indication and warning. It can be used in a way that everyone on planet Earth would think that it's alien, and it isn't.
I see what you mean.
Okay, so this is the real danger in all of this not being disclosed and known, particularly by policymakers and the government and Pentagon and all these folks, is that they're not going to be able, they're going to be so easily gaslit and deceived by people presenting all kinds of phenomena, plural, as extraterrestrial when it isn't. Because they have mastered the ability of this, what's called stagecraft. That's literally what it's called in some circles. And this gets back to this whole question of Project Bluebeam, where they could stage. But what their capabilities are way beyond what most people think they are. And I began working with some of these geniuses back in the early 90s that I met who in late 1950s and 60s had figured this out. So the electronics and the very high-end electromagnetic field systems that can do this were unpacked pretty well by between 1955 and 1965, in that a decade.
So with the different dimensions, there's another dimension in this room right now, and we just can't.
Within this room, folded, it's the enfoldment, it's quantum entanglement. So, what Einstein called the spooky effect, where the same particle be in two places at once. Mm-hmm. But visualize that at every point in space and time, at this level of quantum entanglement, you have access to any other point in space and time, but also these other dimensions, up to and including the most rarefied, what some people would call the conscious being, the unbounded consciousness. It's all folded within this in what I call the real cosmology, understanding the cosmology, which is way beyond astrophysics, current astrophysics. But I think that's the part of this where when you start experimenting with and reverse engineering an extraterrestrial vehicle, their communication systems are not based on the speed of light like our cell phones, right, or video. They're based on this understanding of the cosmos because they've lived for millennia in that understanding. And so this is why, we talk about the fact that they have technologies that interface with directed thought. I call it technology-assisted consciousness, and consciousness that assists the technology. So they can interface bioelectric field and thought, and they navigate the spacecraft.
Shit.
Really, really cool stuff. I mean, Elon Musk is trying to do some stuff with Neuralink, but he's still using wires and at the speed of light. But the idea would be the same, that your thought could actuate to a technological interface that would then not only be used in communication, because what's that? The speed of thought versus the speed of light.
Yeah.
But think about why that's so important. If you're from the Andromeda Galaxy, which is 2.5 million light years from here, at the speed of light, your cell phone, it would take 2.5 million years for a signal to get there, and another 2.5 million years for them to answer, and you hear it. It's 5 million years. So when I talk about this, I say there are certain technological thresholds you have to have crossed if you're an extraterrestrial interstellar civilization. Those technologies have. The good news is we understand them, and they could be used to great purpose on Earth. Energy generation, healing, all kinds of things, medical. But right now, they're in the hands of the worst group of sociopaths that have ever lived, and they dwarf, by far, Stalin or Hitler in terms of their intention and their capabilities way beyond. It's not the buffoonery of the Third Reich. This is the high-tech, very dangerous end. Now, this to me is, as a doctor, I tell people this is like a knife, or I can use a knife to put butter on my bread, or I can use it to slit your throat. Now, so technology is neutral. It's the consciousness and the intention of those who wield it, who have it. Mm-hmm. In this situation right now, it's the worst of all worlds, because you have the most amazing, wonderful technologies in the hands of the worst group ever that have quite a bit of malice and intention. So this is what I think has to be fixed, and that's why the Disclosure Project is trying to move this along. First, yes, now we've established UFOs are real. Well, that was known in the 50s, 60s, 40s. But now what's behind all that? Unpacking all the detail. And the reason the scientific end of this is so important, even for operations, is that this group of illegal covert human projects, they have surveillance, communication systems, transport systems, and sciences that are. Ben Rich, the week before he died, told James Goodall, you heard him at our conference, one of the last men to talk to him. He says, anything that you've seen in Star Trek and can imagine, we've done at the Lockheed Skunk Works. And he said, not at Area 51, but at the desert base, the underground facility.
Wow. How interested, when the disc-like object, what did you call that?
Oumuamua.
Oumuamua.
Yes.
That, the meteor that you recovered pieces of, how much interest is the government showing in your work?
The government supported my research so far. There was they had no issue. In fact, the U.S. Space Command, under the Department of Defense, sent a letter to NASA confirming the interstellar origin of the meteor. And so I'm grateful that they provided the confirmation and the data about this meteor that allowed us to search for the remains of that meteor. And there is another meteor that we identified as potentially being interstellar. It was discovered in March 2017, and I asked the government to verify whether it was indeed interstellar, and if they do, then we will go after that as well.
Are you worried the government is going to interfere with your studies if you...
So far, they haven't, so I'm not worried. There were visits to my home, for example, by the director of AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, who by now left his job, Sean Kirkpatrick, and his team. They asked questions about the Galileo project, but I think it was just for them to figure out what we are doing. And I have nothing to hide. It's a scientific project.
What do you think of some of the research that's... Have you heard of Skinwalker Ranch?
Yes.
What do you think of some of the research that's going on there?
Well, the problem with that place is that the location is known. So you can imagine hackers planting evidence that appears weird. And that's the issue I have, because you never know if people are trying to trick you. And it's best to operate without people knowing exactly where the surveys
I've
do.
not thought of that. I've thought of that.
Yeah.
Do you think there is any sort of... I mean, a lot of people think this is some sort of... Maybe some of the phenomena stuff that we're seeing is some type of a spiritual entity. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think it's a smart thing to associate physical objects with spirituality, because the way I think about our brain is the same way I think about artificial intelligence. Natural intelligence and artificial intelligence, may become similar, or we might be able to better understand the human brain by generating AI systems that are as complex, they have as many connections as the number of synapses in the human brain. We are getting there. And at that point, the system is so complex that it behaves in ways that we cannot forecast. And as a result, it looks as if it has a sense of independence, consciousness, or a spiritual component to it, simply because we can't figure it out. As I mentioned, Moses felt that the burning bush that was never consumed has a spiritual significance, right? And today you can buy online a gadget that would have given Moses the same sense of awe. And so if we are able to reproduce or even create machines that operate better than the human brain in terms of how complex they are, it would imply that, what we call spirituality is just an emergent phenomena out of complex systems. Okay, and so I don't think we should imagine that a system that is unpredictable to us must have a sense of free will necessarily. I think it's just that it has so many degrees of freedom that it can't really operate in a predictable way. It's affected by its environment. It's affected by quantum mechanics that introduces some uncertainty. So altogether, it gives us the impression that there is something beyond the physical reality, but it's simply our ignorance of understanding the details of that complex entity. And, if we find a functioning device from extraterrestrials, it may well be equipped with artificial intelligence, and might be difficult for us to figure out. In fact, if we find such a thing, I wouldn't want to rely on physicists telling us what it's doing, because physicists are not used to dealing with intelligent systems. I would hire psychologists. Psychologists deal with intelligent systems. These are humans, right? And they would be better equipped to figure out the intent of an AI system that came from outside of this earth. I would also use our own AI systems, because they might have affinity to extraterrestrial AI systems more than to us, if they are built of the same materials.
Wow. Very interesting.
By the way, the whole subject of AI, we have to realize that the first time we meet aliens might be when we deal with AI, which are our technological kids. I have 2 daughters, and I don't always understand them, right? And so I have no problem with the fact that they might be smarter than I am. But the same could apply to our technological kids. AI systems might outsmart us, we won't figure it out. And this will be our first encounter with an entity that is smarter than us, because until now we thought that we are the smartest here on Earth. And it will be a good preparation for an encounter with a more intelligent neighbor. And maybe that gadget that will be functional, that we would encounter, would have in it AI. Because if you think about interstellar travel, the trip takes a long time. Even at the speed of light, it takes tens of thousands of years to cross the Milky Way galaxy. And that means that biological creatures like us will not survive the journey. There are cosmic rays that would damage our body. But you can imagine hardening a technological system to survive the journey, and having an AI guide it so that it's independent, doesn't wait for guidance from the sender. So the situation is similar to helicopter parenting. This is the approach we took with all the gadgets we sent to Mars, for example. They are operated by engineers at the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. However, and we even operated a helicopter on Mars. So that's why helicopter parenting is really appropriate here. But eventually, when we go to greater distances, and it may start with Titan, we want our probes to have their own intelligence so that they make decisions on the spot. It takes a long time for the signal to go back and forth from Earth to the probe. And so it's just like sending our kids out of home. You don't expect your kid to call you for any decision, only to report back when something important happens and send you a postcard or call you. And therefore, using AI for space exploration would be ideal when you go large distances, because then you send autonomous systems that can operate on their own based on the guidelines that we gave them. And they can communicate back the most important information to us. As of now, we haven't sent AI to space. But to me, it sounds like the wave of the future.
Have there been any other signs of extraterrestrial life that we haven't talked about yet, that you're aware of?
We talked about radio signals, the search for molecular fingerprints in the atmospheres of planets, which is a primitive life in the form of microbes, and objects that may have arrived near Earth, and other technological signatures like industrial pollution, city lights. So these are all subjects I worked on, but we covered all of them.
When you were talking about the observatory that's going to be in Chile, I can't remember the year.
2025. In
2025.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that you thought that we would see objects like the disk maybe one every couple of months.
Yes.
What makes you certain with that prediction?
Given that we found one object over a period of time of a few years at that distance, and with a telescope that we know the capabilities of, now we can extrapolate and ask, what's the likelihood that a much better telescope like the Rubin Observatory will find similar objects? It can look farther away because it's more sensitive. And if such objects come and go on random trajectories around us, you can figure out the frequency by which the Rubin Observatory will discover objects like Oumuamua. So that's the basis for this prediction. And of course, the key question is whether these objects are on random orbits or Oumuamua was special and was on a targeted mission. But assuming that they are on random orbits, there should be many of them. In fact, there could be as many as a quadrillion such objects within the solar system right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So a lot of, if it's technological in origin, a lot of space trash, but it may not be very massive if it's thin, if we're talking about thin membranes. And by the way, 3 years after Oumuamua was discovered, in September 2020, the same telescope in Hawaii discovered another object that was pushed away from the sun, but without any cometary evaporation. It was pushed by reflecting sunlight. And a few weeks after the discovery, the astronomers realized actually this object came from Earth. It's a rocket booster that NASA launched in 1966 in a lunar lander mission. And so we know that it's technological because we produced it, and it had thin walls, and that's why it had a large surface for its mass, so that it can be pushed by reflecting sunlight. And I rest my case. Here is a technological object that appeared to share the same qualitative features of Oumuamua. And for example, Elon Musk launched the Tesla Roadster car as a dummy payload on the Falcon Heavy launch in 2018. And now this car is orbiting the sun in an elliptic orbit. We cannot see it even with our best telescopes because it's too small, it doesn't reflect enough sunlight. But imagine this car crashing into the Earth in 20 million years. It might do so. It would appear as an unusual meteor in the sky, and if astronomers are not waiting for it, they would say it's a rock of a type that we've never seen before. And so my point is that Elon Musk may not be the most accomplished space entrepreneur since the Big Bang. There may have been many others that, imagine their cars floating in interstellar space and crashing into the Earth every now and then.
The first book I wrote, Area 51, is about a CIA base in the middle of the Nevada desert, inside the Nevada test and training range where we set off nuclear weapons. Did you know this?
I did.
Okay. People know that now, and it's great. And then that base is inside an even bigger test and training range where pilots fly out of Nellis. But in the 50s, Area 51 was specifically set up by the CIA to develop the U-2 spy plane, which was this high-flying aircraft, 70,000 feet up it flew. In 1950, that is just nothing short of a miracle. It was out of the range of Russian surface-to-air missiles. For Area 51, I got to interview the guys who built that airplane from scratch, literally. It did not come with a manual. They built it. I interviewed the pilots who flew it over the Soviet Union, flew it over, all kinds of places. And it was so secret that Eisenhower knew about it, the director of the CIA, and the guys at Area 51 working on it.
That's it.
That's it. It was because it needed to be secret, because if the Russians knew about it, they'd shoot it down, which they ended up doing with Gary Powers in 1960. So the CIA knew it was inevitable that it would get shot down, but they were just playing with fire until it did. But the point of all this is when that was flying, it was mistaken for a UFO. Think about something flying 70,000 feet up. People didn't know airplanes fly at 25,000 feet-ish. Imagine you're somebody that looks up, and also the U-2 has these incredibly long wings. So it just looks like a flying cross. And the reflection of it, it looks like a UFO because it's not where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, could you even see it 70,000 feet?
You could. And
you could
people
tell
did.
it was a cross?
Well, they didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But the CIA learned about that, and it was like an oh shit moment. Our project's going to become busted open. The public's going to know about it. And people started writing to their congressman. I have seen these letters declassified from the CIA. We're really concerned there's a UFO over their state. And then the CIA decided to use this as part of a strategic deception campaign. Well, let's goose this idea that there are UFOs because it's going to hide its cover for the actual U-2. Does that mean that every UFO or every UFO sighting is a U-2? Of course not. But when you look at that as a fact, it becomes interesting in the narrative. When the CIA built the follow-on plane, which was called the A-12 Oxcart. So did you ever see any of the X-Men movies?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you know that plane they fly?
I do.
Right, so that's the SR-71.
Okay.
That's the Air Force version of it. It's a two-seater. The CIA precursor plane, which was totally secret, not declassified till, 20 years ago. It was a one-seater. It had a CIA pilot in it. They flew it out at Area 51. It went Mach 3 something in 1960. 2,300 miles an hour at 90,000 feet. Okay? In 1960, think of what a refrigerator looked like in 1960. Okay? So this was like technology that no one could even comprehend, and they had to keep it secret. And in my interviews with Colonel Slater, who was in charge of the whole program, he took me through the exact details of like people seeing the plane, even in an commercial airplane. The example he gave me was a group of people I think it was an American Airlines flight, saw the Oxcart as it was coming down from 90,000 feet to try to land at Area 51. And they saw it. And they all thought they saw UFOs. And Slater told me the story and showed me some documentation of the FBI meeting the plane in Los Angeles when it landed, saying, like, you did not see a UFO. You must sign this disclosure paper saying you will never share that you saw a UFO. So it built this mystique in, if the FBI shows up and said, you did not see that UFO,
Who are they doing this to?
The civilians on the American airline. They had them all signed. So the point of this is the CIA would use the sort of mythology of a UFO to help cover the programs that it's trying to hide.
So was the FBI in on it?
The FBI did not know. Good question. The FBI did not know about the A-12 Oxguard. The FBI was told, make all those people sign those non-disclosures and tell them they didn't see a UFO. So then you have all these FBI agents now who are prone to thinking, that was a UFO. Again, does it mean all UFO sightings are the A-12 Oxguard, which doesn't fly anymore? Of course not.
Yeah.
But if you have that information, I think you can think more on balance, for me. But
Yeah, and the deception that the government's capable of.
and also when you're talking about aircraft and airspace, it's very difficult for me to accept that our sacredly guarded airspace is regularly intruded by craft that somebody at the Defense Department doesn't know what it is. I just have trouble believing that, having written the books that I've written about high-performance aircraft. But I don't even bother getting into this argument it's not an argument, but this discussion with the people who really believe, that these are UAPs, the new term, which I'm fascinated by.
Have you looked into Skinwalker Ranch at all by chance?
I mean, I've interviewed all the guys who are at Skinwalker. Not all of them, but many of them. This is before, not the current situation, but this is when Bigelow owned it. And the original team that was there that claimed to have seen the portals and the werewolves and by the way, these are PhDs with DARPA contracts telling me all this. It's just hard for my brain to conceptualize that other than their perception, which is what we were talking about at break. Yeah.
Yep. With that being said, now they see all these radiation spikes right as these UAPs, UFOs, these phenomenons happen. Have you looked into that at all?
Well, I haven't, because I would say my first thing would be like, who's they and where are these radiation spike documents coming from? So in other words, when I worked with all the people that were at the Skinwalker Ranch when it was Bigelow, it was always an internal situation, and it was the documents are Bigelow's and you can't look at them because they're in his possession. So it seemed like a closed loop. Mm-hmm. But I do want to say, and we were talking about this at break, that the analogy that I think of all of this, so that it's clear that I'm not just dismissively self-righteous, which I would never want to be. I'm much more curious than that. But the analogy I used was what I told you about hearing things, right? Like, because I believe this is an issue of perception, what you can see. You think of some people being colorblind. What I see is so different than what they see. Then I think of, as I told you before, like sometimes, you have like, you hear a high pitched frequency, and maybe it's because you were listening to your ear pods too long, or you were, in an airplane. And so you suddenly say to someone, do you hear that? Because it's, you actually hear something. Mm-hmm. Is that in your brain? Is that in your perception? Is that in the environment? Perhaps when people see UAPs, they are seeing them and others aren't. For me, that's my current position on how I think about that.
So are you saying it originates in the mind?
I do not have the answer. I'm just curious about what it might be. And I'm also, the reason why it's really interesting is millions of people are interested in this. We talked about this before. Who wants to talk about nuclear holocaust when you can talk about possible aliens among us?